Hello and welcome back to On the Soul's Terms podcast. And today we are entering the sidecar fairy tale episode for the 8th house. And of course, I've chosen a Grimm brothers story called The Raven. This is actually a story explored in depth in my old podcast with my friend Alexander and producer Emma Love. And we actually did 3 episodes on this very fairy tale. So it is somewhere in the background of my consciousness and my psyche. It's a fairy tale that Alexander himself brought to the show. It was very deep and celebrated. So I'm going to attempt to combine and condense a lot of that material into this one episode. But of course, the benefit of the houses series is that we get to really focus it into 8th house themes. And like all of these stories, they can be used for many, many different things. They can be taken to anywhere that we want to take them in a way, as long as we follow the roots of the archetype and true to the archetypal realm, then we can really take them anywhere. But this one is very much almost like instructions for the underworld, and not only how to get there, but how to be there and how to maintain ourselves there, and also how to come out of there. So there's an entry point and an exit point. So essentially we're going from the 7th house cusp of the 8th, where there's an entry point to the underworld. We enter the underworld and stay for as long as we need to, which is its own piece of the journey. And then we find our way back out. And it turns out that this story of the Raven is very, very instructive for that. It's not the kind of story that can be broken down into a 3-part saga, as far as I can see, but it's more like many different chapters, and in each of those chapters, we get to explore particular symbols and images and hang out with those images and find our way. I hope you're ready for story time. If you can get to that place inside where you can really receive a story. I always think about that experience of being a child and having a parent or an adult or some figure read to us, and it's such a visceral experience that I'm sure we all have in our bones, that memory of being read to, and with our child imagination being transported. So for this story, we invite in the child mind, and if you do have a chance to, just like our last episode, the invitation was there to find a place to maybe have a cup of tea and sit down and maybe even close one's eyes. And similar for this, as we'll be going into fairy tale land, which is a portal in a way, a portal to another world. So we will be going to another world and back again with the story of the Raven. So this story opens up with a queen and her daughter, the princess. And the daughter is not even old enough to put her feet on the floor yet. She's still being carried, but she's making a lot of noise and she's causing a lot of trouble, and her cries, the mother doesn't really know what to do. And it's frustrating her and even angering her and even bringing up a certain rage because she's tired and she can't get the sleep that she needs. And in one moment that's almost a bit of a slip of the tongue, in a sense, her rage boils over and she opens up the window just as some ravens are flying by. And she says, "I wish that you were a raven so I could get some rest." And in that moment, the little girl transforms into a raven and flies out of the window, and then flies deep into the dark forest and remains there for a long time. So this, in one little section of a fairy tale, really takes us straight to the heart of the 8th house as it's experienced in our charts. It's the place where elements of our childhood and our early experiences have not been digested. It's the feeling tone of that dark mother, which is the opposite of the benevolent mother. So here we have a queen who has suddenly slipped into dark mother consciousness and has erupted out of that space. And of course, what I love about this particular story is you can get the sense that everybody's doing their best here, that the mother is tired and exhausted, and that the child is just calling out for a need that she can't explain. But somewhere in that experience, there's some kind of a moment that happens, a rift or a break, or, the creation of the demon or the dragon or the witch or some scary figure, that ultimately it's part of the human condition to have that experience. Our imaginations are going to take our early experiences and put them through the imaginal, put them through the fantasy material and amplify and arrive at dream images and images from fairy tale and myth. That's why dreams and fairy tale and myth are so great to get into, and also why we should be careful to clean up myth and fairy tale and even our dreams, to make sure we, rather than clean them up, just amplify them. We want to see exactly what's going on, exactly what the psyche is pouring forward, because only when we see that can we really work with that. So this is the early experience put in a fairy tale form, and that could mean anything to you of any experience that you may have had that remains difficult and remains separate to the identity, just like the 8th house is that quincunx 150-degree angle, blind spot to the 1st house of the personality structure. Things that happen in the 8th house, they don't necessarily connect to our ego structure or our personality, or they do connect, but in a way that splits off. So in the same way that those two fish of Pisces, they swim in opposite directions, but are always connected by the knot in the middle. Things that may have happened back here may have split off, but they're still connected. And to find those parts that have split off, that's both the gold that we carry and the dark material that we maybe are ashamed of, or anything in that spectrum. We need to travel into this place to recover certain things. And so this young princess has become the raven, and she's flown off into the dark forest. She's flown off deep into the unconscious and is now hidden there. So we start with, obviously, we had this in Snow White as well, the white, the black, and the red. And so we come from a state of innocence as the child or the baby. Then a red moment erupts, and we're turned black, and we go into the blackening Negredo process of a darkening and head into the dark forest. So that's where our story begins. And of course, the raven is a particularly curious bird, explored in so many different traditions as so many different things. I mean, one of the things about ravens and what they do is that they eat the dead. So in a way, we can hear that archetypally or symbolically, as they're able to digest this death material that the other parts of the psyche are not able to digest. Obviously, a night bird, one that is representative of the night world and shows up in so many different places, but also is known as a messenger or an underworld messenger. So Odin in Norse mythology had two ravens, Hugin and Munin, and I apologize for pronouncing that wrongly, which I almost certainly have done there. And these two could fly across the worlds of Midgard, Hel, and Asgard, so the human realm, the dead realm, and the divine realm. So in this case, the raven is a psychopomp, just like our Hermes in Greek mythology, that can go in between worlds. And the fact that his two ravens are called thought and memory sort of tell us that, a few things actually. Sometimes this is the things that we can't let go of, or the thoughts that haunt us, ancestral memory and shadow inheritance, which are all very 8th house. And of course, these ravens, they also digest, just like the raven, they digest what they observe, whether that's information or secrets or corpses. And then these particular ravens are explicitly associated with battlefields where death is its freshest. So we've got that component of North mythology and Celtic mythology. There was the Phantom Queen, the Morrigan, who could turn herself into multiple different forms, including the crow or the raven, and she would appear on the battlefield. And she was associated with washing the dead, fate, sovereignty, and prophecy. And she was one who would oversee those transitions, those endings, and initiatory ruptures. So that's also very 8th house as well. But coming back to the Greek material, one place that the raven shows up, which is often sometimes the crow and sometimes the raven, and we'll get into that distinction shortly, shows up in the story of the birth of Asclepius. And this story we'll be looking into in more depth next week, as I have Dr. Travis Elliott, who'll be joining me on the show, just to poise ourselves on the cusp of the 8th and 9th house and really just stay there and linger there, which essentially is this place that is either the gate of Hades, like the entry point, or the exit point. And that really depends on which way around the wheel you're going. And we'll be able to talk more in depth next week with Travis. I'm really looking forward to bringing you that. We've already had the conversation, and it was a rich one and deep, and went into so much of the material that really fascinates me. In this story, Apollo connects with Coronis, who's essentially a mortal woman, but her name, Coronis, obviously means crow. So we have this sort of Apollo, the sun god, connecting with the crow maiden, so another black bird. And then he impregnates Coronis and then leaves, abandons her, and Coronis then gets together with a mortal man named Ischus, whose name means strength. The white crow, or the white raven, and it just flips from bird to bird in different tellings, sees this and flies out to Apollo to tell him what's happened. And we can imagine this bird feeling very proud of himself. He's bringing the knowledge, and he's bringing it quite innocently in his white form. And then that enrages Apollo, the sun god. So the golden Apollo gets enraged and scorches the crow or the raven and turns it black from then on. So this is one of those stories of like how the crow became black or how the raven became black. We can hear elements of this throughout this section of the houses. Even in Snow White, this happens, where the innocence of Snow White gets together with the knowledge or the experience of the Dark Queen, and in between them is the red apple. That experience or that knowledge, this is a rupture into her world, and then she goes to sleep and has to go through certain initiatory processes at that point. And the same is happening here in a way, where the white bird meets the golden Apollo, gives information, much like that psychopomp, and then is scorched for it and becomes black. So taking us from the world of innocence into the scorching, and then into that darker realm, the Negredo initiation. This is also what happens to our young princess who gets turned into the maiden. We can imagine this as like an early life curse or an unconscious inheritance, and that is 8th house materially, unconscious inheritance that she receives there. And this is a punishment for knowing, isn't it? This is a punishment in the case of the crow or the raven for knowing what she knows. So we also have deeper themes of the child flying into the forest, to the psyche that gets exiled into the unconscious. And, shame and shame dynamics come up here, abandonment and everything that tends to exist in this house that's such tough material to come up against, but so rich if we're able to. And it's amazing, isn't it, just in this one paragraph of the story, just how much can erupt from there. Just to take a little side path here, a little tangent, I think it's important to distinguish between raven and crow here, because they're obviously linked to each other. Both birds are known as corvids. They're both symbols of intelligence, appetite for the dead, liminality, trickster energy, and the ability to thrive at boundaries, whether that's cities or forests or battlefields or burial sites. And they both have a relationship with the truth and omens and taboos. And so then there's a lot that links them together, but the crow is a smaller bird and is therefore more intimate and social and in the everyday shadow, whereas the raven is a larger bird and more liminal, mystical and underworldly, and the bigger, greater shadows of life. So important just to make that brief distinction. I mean, I think they can be interchanged in many ways, but making sure that we're clear that in this particular story we're with the raven and we're not necessarily with the crow. So then back to the story, there's a man who's walking through this particular part of this forest on this particular day and hears the cries of this raven maiden and walks towards the sound and eventually finds the raven. And she says to him, actually, I'm not a raven, I'm a princess, but I've been cursed into this form. And he's very, very keen to help her in any way that he can. And so the raven maiden, she gives him some instructions and she says, go further into the forest and you will find a house wherein sits an aged woman who will offer you meat and drink, but you must accept nothing. For if you eat and drink anything, you'll fall into a sleep, and then you will not be able to set me free. In the garden behind the house there is a great heap of tan, and on this you shall stand and wait for me. For 3 days I will come every afternoon at 2 o'clock in a carriage. On the first day 4 white horses will be harnessed to it, then 4 chestnut horses, and lastly 4 black ones. But if you are not awake but sleeping, I shall not be set free. So these are very clear instructions on how to handle the underworld, and we need to make sure that we're not acting out of our compulsive behaviors here. And the man is very clear in his response, and he promises that he'll do everything that she desires. Just straight up, yes, I can do that. And he's probably thinking to himself, that sounds pretty easy. All I need to do is not eat and not drink. I'll be fine. And so he says that to the raven. The raven says back, alas, I know already that you will not set me free. You will accept something from the woman. And then, of course, the man promises again that there's no way that he's going to eat or drink anything. But of course, the raven is a little wiser than that in her raven form. This is like the prophetic raven who can already see what's going to happen. And also, it's probably quite obvious by his response that what he thinks he can do is just overpower the unconscious with his will. And the raven is very clear that that is not how this is going to go. And so we have this tension point here between the sun and our conscious self and our unconscious self. So this may be Apollo's world, again, to bring back Apollo of the sun, our conscious self, and the Hecate world of the unconscious self, which is obviously and clearly more powerful a driver. So the man here is really clear of what he wants to do, but will he be able to do it? And the answer is already baked into the cake, isn't it? So he goes deeper and deeper into the forest. So he's already in the realm of the unconscious, and he's going further into the unconscious here. And he finds the house, and the old woman comes to him and says, oh my God, poor man, how faint you are. Come and refresh yourself, eat and drink. And the man very clearly says, no, I will not eat or drink. But the woman let him have no peace and said, well, if you will not eat, take 1 drink out of the glass. 1 is nothing. So she's pulling him towards his compulsion, pulling him in and drawing him closer. And of course, he lets himself be persuaded and he drinks. And then shortly before 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he goes into the garden on the tan heap to wait for the raven. And he's standing there and he's really trying to stay awake. But of course, then his weariness overcomes him and he lies down and he falls asleep. At 2 o'clock, the raven comes driving up with the 4 white horses. But she was already in deep grief. Even before she'd seen him, she was already in deep grief. And she thought to herself, I know he is asleep. And of course, when she came to the garden, he was lying there asleep on the heap of tan. So let's just take a little pause here and have a feel into some of these symbols. So firstly, I think 2 p.m. is very interesting astrologically, because this is the entry point to the 8th house when we follow the sun. So if we follow the sun, it rises and then it spends around about 2 hours in each house. So it goes from, say, let's say if we were right on the equator at around about an equinox time, then the sun rises at 6. At 12 o'clock, it's midday. So we've gone 2 hours in each house. 2 hours after that, we move through the 9th house. And then at 2 p.m. exactly, we are entering the 8th. So when we follow the sun's motion this way, it's called the diurnal motion, where we follow the sun and the moon and the planets. We follow them this way. Once we get to 2 p.m., that strong sun that was there at the midday sun has already started to wane, and it's making its way down ultimately towards the underworld. And that's why in diurnal motion, this point of the 9th and 8th house cusp is considered to be the gate of the underworld, because the sun is starting to lose its power here. And we can see that in our story, that our man, who is very clear on his conscious intentions, is coming in to this house around midday with his consciousness really at the forefront. And the Hecate woman, the unconscious, is tempting him quite easily in a way into his compulsions and his behaviors. And so there he goes at 2 o'clock. He's already fast asleep. He's tumbled back into his compulsions that are in this 8th house. And the mound of tan. So tan is the leftover material of wood, usually oak wood, that is used to create enough heat to turn the hide of a cow into leather. So we have another alchemical process here, a big mound of tan that is the material left behind after an alchemical cooking process of turning ourselves into leather, or turning the hide into leather. So we can also get the sense of like there's a hint that we are in the beginning of an alchemical process. So even though he's failing here, he was almost destined to fail. There was no way for him to achieve this, because he's still very much overtaken by his ego and his sun consciousness, his day consciousness, that thinks it's all powerful and thinks it can do anything. But clearly it cannot. And that's why his compulsions are taking over. So of course, the next day around noon, and it actually says this, around noon, so when the sun is at its highest in the sky, the woman again brings him the food and the drink, and he would not take any of it. But she would have no rest, and persuaded him until at length he took one more drink out of the glass. And so as 2 o'clock comes, he's in the garden on the tan, and he's waiting and he's trying to stay awake, but the great weariness takes over him again, and his limbs would not support him, and he fell down and went into a heavy sleep again. As the raven's driving up with the 4 chestnut horses, so this kind of red-colored horses, like a brownie red. It's almost like this was as red as a horse could get without becoming sort of a fantasy horse. She drove up, and as she's driving towards him, she thinks, I know he is asleep. And of course gets there and tries to wake him up, but there was no wakening him. The next day, it's 12 o'clock again, and this time the man is like, right, I am absolutely clear that I am not going to eat anything. And he comes with extra amounts of conscious willpower. There's no way that this woman will convince me to eat anything. And then the woman says, oh my God, look at you. You're wasting away. You're withering away. You clearly need to eat something here. Look at you. You're about to die. And he replies, I'm not allowed to eat or drink and will not do so. So you can hear the will coming in very strongly here. But she set a dish of food down with a glass of wine before him. So now it's the whole thing. It's the big dish of food and the wine and everything. Before he was just having a drink, a sip. And then when he smelt the food, he just couldn't resist. And he ate and he drank and he swallowed a deep draught this time, not just a sip. And then went out into the garden and to the heap of tan and waited for the king's daughter. But he became even more weary than the day before and lay down to sleep as soundly as if he had been a stone. At 2 o'clock, the raven came with the 4 black horses and the coachman, and everything else was black. And she was already in the deepest grief and said, I know that he is asleep and cannot set me free. So it might be worth also feeling here that she is on a chariot, much like Helios, the sun god drives a chariot through the sky. So I do think we are getting hints and glimpses from this fairy tale that this is the story of the sun god, getting out of his domain, in a sense, weakening his power, and the unconscious power beginning to take over. So she came to him and saw him. He was lying fast asleep. And she shook him and called him, but she could not wake him. And then She put a loaf of bread beside him, and a piece of meat, and a bottle of wine. And these were magical boons. And he could consume as much of them as all he liked, and they would never grow less. And then after this, she took a gold ring from her finger and put it on his finger, and her name was engraved on it. And lastly, she laid a letter beside him where was written what she had given him, and that none of these things would ever grow less. And in it was also written this: I see right well that here you will never be able to set me free. But if you are still willing to do so, come to the Golden Castle of Stromburg. It lies in your power, of that I am certain. And when she'd given him these things, she sat herself in her carriage and drove to the Golden Castle of Stromburg. So this is interesting wording. If you're still willing to do so, it lies in your power. So I think we're moving here between the Mars component of the 8th house and the Pluto component, where the will might be Mars, but Pluto is always a deeper river, a deeper thread than Mars could ever be. And so it's not about the willpower, but it is about some other kind of power that he needs to discover within himself in order to rescue this maiden, rescue this raven, rescue the princess, and help her come out of this raven form and back into her golden self. This is sort of where the quest really begins. Before, he thought this was something easy, something he could achieve without too much trouble. And now he realizes that his willpower is weak and the unconscious is strong. He's going to have to get in touch with the unconscious. In fact, symbolically, he is on a quest to recover the raven part of himself by going to this Golden Castle of Stromburg. So, of course, the next step in uncovering some of these deeper symbols is like, what is this Golden Castle of Stromburg? And as somebody that doesn't speak German, it just seemed like a funny sounding name. But upon further research, the Berg part is a mountain, and the Strom is some kind of river or stream. And so we get the sense that this place, the Golden Castle, is something like a combination of the mountain and the river, the mountain and maybe where the river Styx and Mount Olympus somehow magically combine themselves into one symbol. We see that also in the story of Psyche and Eros, where the river Styx is coming down from a mountain. And in Psyche's third task, she has to retrieve some water, and she uses the eagle to retrieve that. It's almost like this is a symbol that maybe gives us a hint with the mountain element of this, that we might be heading towards a place that might take us into the 9th house, into the place of higher meaning and higher learning. The eagle as a symbol of Psyche's tasks is that overview, but she's also connecting to the river Styx with the vial that she needs to get. So Stromburg is a bit like that. It's like this mission, this task that we need to go on to somehow bring Olympus and Styx together. So when the man awoke, he was obviously pretty devastated, and he'd lost his opportunity, and he was sad at heart. And he said to himself, "She is certainly driven by, and I have not set her free." But then he saw the things lying beside him and read the letter, which told him how everything had to happen. So he got up and dusted himself off from all that tan and decided, yes, this is it. I'm going to go to the Golden Castle of Stromburg. But he had no idea where that was. And I think this is a really important component. This is a really important moment of 8th house journeys, where we kind of get a sense of where we need to go, but absolutely no idea of where that is, how to go there, where the maps are, where the instructions are. We just know that we have to go there, but no idea where it is. And so it says that after he had walked about the world for a long time, I wonder what this means for the man, to walk about the world for a long time. I wonder what that means for our own journeys as well. to walk about the world for a long time. It could be decades here. It could be lifetimes that we just walk about the world and think, oh man, I should be at some Golden Castle of Stromburg here, but I have no idea where it is. But after walking for a long time, he entered into a dark forest. So here's another dark forest. So we're going back into the unconscious. We've been in the world, in that upper world, and now we're heading back to the dark forest. And he walked for 14 days. So we could say he walked for 2 Saturn cycles worth of days, and he still could not find his way out. So ultimately he stumbled back into a dark forest, but he's looking for his way out, and that is not how this is going to go. And then it was evening, and he was tired, and he laid down in a thicket and fell asleep. And then he walked the next day. It was evening again, and just as he was about to lie down again in some bushes, he heard a howling and a crying, so much so that he could not go to sleep. And at the time when people light candles, he saw one candle glimmering and got up and went towards it. And he came to a house which seemed very small because in front of it was a great giant. And he thought to himself, if I go in and the giant sees me, it will very likely cost my life. But he decided to go in anyway. And when the giant saw him, he said, well, it is well that you've come, for it is a long time since I've eaten, and I will at once devour you for my supper. So now things have turned where it was originally him being asked not to devour, and now he has to ask the giant not to devour him. What are giants? So we think of giants as these overwhelming unconscious forces. You know, his craving for the meat and the wine and the bread has now transformed and become this giant figure of all of those cravings. But now they're craving to eat him. They want to eat him. And so he's in a tight spot here, and he says quite simply, I'd rather you did not, which is a good start. I'd rather that you did not eat me. I do not like to be eaten. But if you have any desire to eat, I have quite enough here to satisfy you. And the giant says, well, if that is true, you may be easy. I was only going to devour you because I had nothing else. And then they went out and they sat down at the table, and the man took out the bread, the wine, and the meat, which never comes to an end. And the giant was very happy and ate till his heart's content. So he's finally made a connection to the giant, and rather than try to feed himself, he's begun to feed the beast. As we've talked about in the 8th house, it's one of the keys to the 8th of how to satisfy ourselves without becoming that destructive behavior, becoming our destructive instincts. And so the giant was very happy, and now they were starting to get along. And so then the man asked the giant, can you tell me where the Golden Castle of Stromburg is? And the giant said, well, let me look at my map. It has all the towns and villages and houses, and they're all to be found on it. And so he brought out the map, which he had in his room, and looked for the castle, but he could not find it. And then the giant said, it's okay. I have some still larger maps in my cupboard upstairs, and we'll look at them. So he heads upstairs to get these bigger maps, thinking, I just need more overview here. I just need, again, more consciousness. But there too, it was in vain, and the Golden Castle of Stromburg was not on these maps. And then the man thought, this is no use. It's not going to get me there. So he says, look, I'm just going to set out again. I'm just going to try to wander around in the world again. And the giant, this actually begs him to wait a few days until his brother, who'd gone out to bring some provisions, came home. And when the brother came home, they asked the brother about the Golden Castle of Stromburg, and he replied, when I have eaten and have had enough, I'll look at the map. So again, this is like the second layer, the second brother, the second giant. Maybe it's not enough to just feed one of these giants. We have to feed the one that's also hidden before we can really know where we're going. And we have to wait as well. So there's another impulse to leave this place. Maybe this is not the right place, and a deeper current that says, stay here. This is where you need to be. So then they went to his chamber, this second brother, and they looked on his map, but they couldn't find it. Then the brother kept bringing out older maps, and they never rested until they brought out a very ancient map. And on that very ancient map, a long forgotten map, there it was, the Golden Castle of Stromburg. And it was there on the map, but it was many thousands of miles away. And the man asked, well, how am I to get there? And the giant said, well, I have 2 hours. So here we go. The son spends 2 hours in that 8th house. So he has 2 hours in which he'll carry him into the neighborhood. But after that, he has to get back home. And this is a really strange line, to suckle the child that we have. Is it these 2 brothers that have a child? Perhaps it is. Anyway, I haven't been able to get underneath the suckling of the child that these 2 giant brothers seem to have. And I'll leave that for you as the audience to dream into. And if you do get a sense of what that suckling of the child is that these 2 men are doing, please let me know. So then the giant carries the man about 100 leagues from the castle. So he's moving very swiftly, and then puts him down, and he says, you can very well walk the rest of the way alone, and turns back and goes back to his home. And so the man traveled onward day and night at length, and God knows how far this next part of the journey is and how long it takes him, because we get the sense that the giant's been able to take him halfway, and the man has to walk the rest. So maybe that's the thing about these giants. You know, it's like half of the work is done by just meeting these compulsive behaviors and making sure that's not happening anymore. But then once that's done, we're still left there and we need to continue walking on. So then finally he comes to the Golden Castle of Stromburg. So this is a very exciting point in our story where he sees this golden castle. But here's the thing, it stands on a glass mountain. And he looked up above the glass mountain, on the top of the glass mountain where the castle was, and the bewitched maiden, the raven maiden, was driving in her carriage around the castle and then going inside it, and then coming out and driving around and then going inside. And he was so very excited to see her, and so he wanted to climb up to her immediately, and so he tried, but as it was a glass mountain, every time he tried to climb up there, he would always slip down. He could get no purchase on this glass mountain. So this glass mountain, the thing, maybe that glass mountain is the cusp of our 8th and 9th house, where we see where we need to go now. It's all very clear, but we have no purchase on it. It's almost like here, and this is jumping ahead a bit, we have the 9th house experience of seeing where we need to go, but not the 10th house experience of actually forging a path to where we need to go. But it is a joy to at least see where you need to go, even if there's no path available yet. And so the man said, well, I'll stay down here below and wait for her. So he built himself a little hut and stayed in it for a whole year. And every day saw the king's daughter driving up about, but never could reach her. And so this is a very potent part of the story. It's almost like there's a holding vigil here. There's a lighting of the hearth. There's a building of a house. There's building something more stable in which we can spend our time here, knowing that we need to go up that hill, knowing that we also can't get there just yet, but maybe just waiting and waiting until something might show up. He's already learnt now something about the unconscious. He's already made friends with the giants. He's already confronted the witch. He's already failed enough times, and he's not so full of hubris now to think that his will can do whatever he wants his will to do, because as he tries to climb this mountain, he just keeps slipping down, so it's really not working out for him. And so he's set up holding vigil down the bottom here, and he waits for this entire year until one day, just near his hut, 3 robbers, 3 thieves were beating each other. And so here we have the symbol of the 3, which we might associate with Cerberus, the 3-headed dog at the cusp of the underworld, who we meet on the way down. And of course, we meet also on the way back up. And so these 3 robbers, they're beating each other It's much like those three heads. We get the picture of Cerberus's heads always attacking each other. And the man says, God be with you. And then they stopped when they heard him. But because they didn't see anyone, they went back to beating each other. And that time, most dangerously. So he cries out again, God be with you. And again they stopped and looked around and took a pause, but couldn't see anyone, so started beating each other even more aggressively. And then a third time, again he said, God be with you. But then he thought, I must see what these three are about, and went there and saw them beating, and they were beating each other so furiously. And one of them said that he found a stick, and that when that stick struck a door, the door would spring open. And the next said that he found a mantle, and whenever he put it on, he was invisible. And the third said that he had found a horse on which a man could ride everywhere, even up the glass mountain. And they did not know whether they ought to have these things in common or whether they should divide them. So here's our three symbols, very underworld symbols, in fact. The first one is the stick that will open doors. Well, that is Hermes' Caduceus for sure. And Hermes, as psychopomp, has the ability to go in between worlds, just as the raven does in Norse mythology. So we've got the man's meaning of the raven, in a sense. Even in Greek mythology, you have Hecate, who can go between worlds, and also Hermes, who can do the same. So it's like the male and female equivalents of the ability to be psychopomp and to move in between worlds. So the first thing is that stick, or that caduceus, or that key, the magic key that can open doors. Now the next one is this mantle, which is like a coat, and if he puts it on, he becomes invisible. And we remember that from Hades, who has the helmet of invisibility. One of the most useful things for the eighth house and the underworld is to have this cloak or this mantle of invisibility. And we remember in the story of Perseus, as he's coming to see Medusa, one of his gifts is in fact the helmet of invisibility that he has with him. He also has from Hermes the winged shoes. So it's almost like these three things are linking us back to the myth of Medusa and how he might unfreeze this anima, how he might unfreeze this feminine part, how he might unfreeze his intuition and his ability to know on the moon level of things. And the third is a horse which could ride everywhere, even up the glass mountain. So that to me very much sounds like Pegasus. So when Perseus does confront Medusa and is off with the head time, the Pegasus, which means spring in ancient Greek, it means spring, springs out, and a winged horse is definitely able to get up this mountain without any problems. And so really, we have a little bit of an echo here from the Medusa myth. But how is he going to get these things from these three robbers? Well, sometimes to receive something from the trickster, we have to trick the trickster. And so he uses his trickery here. He uses his own psychopomp. He uses his ability to embrace the hermetic, embrace ravenness, the trickster side of ravenness inside of his own self. You know, when I said that word ravenness just then, I thought about the word ravenous. And isn't that an intriguing part of this story, how he's ravenous and he can't help himself from eating and being compulsive. And also the giants are ravenous and want to eat him. And now we come to this part of the story where he embraces his own ravenness as far as the trickster, and he tricks the tricksters. He robs the robbers. So he says to them, I will give you something in exchange for these three things. And we're thinking to ourselves, maybe he's going to give them the endless food and drink, you know, which would be very valuable. Perhaps that's what they'll get. That's what we think as the listeners. That's what I think anyway. Money, indeed, I have not, but I have other things of more value. So that's another hint. Okay, he's going to give them that. But first I must take an experiment to see if you have told the truth. So they put him on the horse, they throw the mantle around him, and they give him the stick in his hand. And so when he had all these things and they were no longer able to see him, he started to give them vigorous blows with the stick and cried, now, vagabonds, you have got what you deserve. Are you satisfied? and left them there and rode up the glass mountain. So yeah, he's found the ability to trick the trickster. It's almost like in the story of Iron John. In order to release the wild man, we need to use a little bit of that trickster energy to steal the key from under mother's pillow. In order to get out of our situation, we may need to not play by the rules for a section of time here. So he goes up the top of the mountain, he strikes the door with his stick, and it springs open immediately. And he went in and he ascended the stairs until he comes to a great hall where the maiden was sitting with a golden goblet of wine before her. So there's the chalice, there's the Holy Grail. And she, however, could not see him because of course, he had the mantle on. And when he came up to her, he drew from his finger the ring which she had given him and threw it into the goblet so that it rang. So it makes the sound almost like a gong. And then she cried, "That is my ring. So the man who is to set me free must be here." So then her and everybody around her, they searched the whole castle but did not find him. But he had gone outside, seated himself on the horse and thrown off the mantle. And when they came to the door, they saw him. So imagine that. He's thrown off the mantle. He's now become visible. He's now willing to become visible and seen in the world after this experience. And when they saw him, they cried aloud in their delight. And then he got off the horse and took the king's daughter in his arms, and she kissed him and said, "Now you have set me free, and tomorrow we will celebrate our wedding." So, of course, here we've managed to go up that great hill, which is the ninth house. We've managed to come back from the underworld, and we've managed to do what Jung referred to from Latin as hieros gamos, which is the inner marriage of our masculine and feminine. And the soul also has done the soul work down here and now able to be visible in the spirit. We also get a sense here of eros, which has been in that underworld place, but then rising up with those wings and taking us to higher places. In a way, there's a big component here of the discovery of a deeper current of energy. And Stromburg could also mean that, like a current, rather than a stream, like a current. And by arriving into Stromburg and achieving what we need to achieve there, we get this new current of energy, like a new lease on life, which is often very indicative of ninth house energy. And the returning of the ring is interesting. It's like the Ouroboros, the circling back of the golden ring. And it was the ring that she gave him initially, and now he gives it back to her. So that was his promise. That was his contract that he made, that he would indeed go on the path that soul gives him and not waver and do everything that's needed to be done. And along the way, obviously lost a lot of things. But all those things were like compulsive behaviors, his incessant insistence upon the will, his own will and drive as the thing that would make things happen. His heroic impulse had to be tempered in order to take on this challenge. And then, of course, the chalice itself, like the Holy Grail, a lot of symbols of the connection, and even the sound that the ring makes when he drops it in the chalice. It's almost like Parsifal here, who finally comes back to the Grail castle and is able to ask the question. So again, another castle that we find where we're able to ask the question, where we're able to come up against the challenges set before us and find our way into integrating those sides of ourselves that right at the beginning of the story, there was that splitting off and the princess has become the raven. And then right at the end here, we have those two coming together. So we had the separation at the beginning, the great ordeal of this story, and of course the return. And those are the elements of initiation. Throughout the story, we had those colors again of white, red, and black, like the horses, even the moment at the beginning of the story. And they thread through, just as they threaded through Snow White, and they'll thread through also our next fairy tale for the ninth house when that comes. And we get the sense of an initiatory process, an alchemical process, finally completing itself and taking us up into the ninth. So yes, I hope you enjoyed this exploration of the Raven fairy tale from the Grimm Brothers collection. I'll leave a link in the show notes for the story itself. So if you want to go back there and just read the story for yourself and see where it takes you, of course, this is only where I've gone with the story, and hopefully I've opened some dream doors, and where you might go will depend on your own subjective feeling about or your own subjective experience of these collective archetypal elements. So the collective unconscious is working through us all, but takes different shapes with our different experiences, with our different dynamics, with our different relationships, with our different family dynamics, with our different station in the world, with our different approach to different philosophies and our feelings about the underworld. All of those things will shape your personal take and feeling and connection to these stories. So I'll leave that for you, and you can go and read the story yourself and take some time while we're still in Scorpio season. Obviously, we still have another week-ish of Scorpio time to keep diving deep, and the deeper you dive in this season, the more satisfying it can be when you enter the 9th. So thanks for joining us. Next week, as I said, I'll have Dr. Travis Elliott. He'll be joining us on the show. We'll be having a nice, deep conversation. Many of the themes of this fairy tale and others that we brought forward and other components of the show come forward in our chat. Travis is a brilliant man and a good friend who I've only just met in Santa Fe when I was at the Living Astrologies conference there with Jason Holly and everybody that was involved in that. And we had many deep dive conversations. It's also a bonus that Travis listens to the show, so he's been tracking along the journey of the houses and has been reflecting in his beautiful, soulful way about everything that's come up in the show itself. So it's a very good reflection of that 8th house, 9th house cusp, and hopefully will give us some guidance of how we ascend on the one hand and how we descend on the other, and that most valuable component to our alchemical process, which is the return and the completion. I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for joining me. Thank you for listening to On the Soul's Terms podcast. To support the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review, sharing with friends, or becoming a patron at patreon.com/onthesoulsterms. Until next time.
Ivri si tombe io di